Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
It started on a Wednesday. I remember that because I'd come home early after back-to-back meetings were canceled. I thought maybe we'd order in, open that bottle of wine we'd been saving, talk for once without screens between us. I wasn't expecting a miracle, just something ordinary, a shared hour that didn't end in silence or tension. But when I walked into the living room, she was already standing there like she'd been rehearsing her lines. Her arms were crossed, her gaze defiant. "Let's just get something clear," she said before I could even take off my shoes. "No obedience, no intimacy. I'm done pretending." The words didn't sting right away. At first, I blinked like she'd spoken in another language, something cold and foreign that hadn't fully translated yet. I stood there, watching her expression. She was waiting for a reaction. She wanted heat. She wanted indignation, confusion, maybe even panic. Instead, I smiled. Not a smug grin or dismissive. Just a small, quiet curve of the mouth, the kind of smile people wear when they've already been through the worst part of something. "Okay," I said. She didn't know what to do with that. She blinked, then tightened her stance like she'd miscalculated. I walked past her and dropped my keys on the counter. Not slamming them down, just letting them land the way they always did, except everything else had changed. She called after me as I moved toward the bedroom. "You're not going to say anything?" I looked back at her over my shoulder. "You said it all." That night, I didn't try to touch her. Didn't ask how her day was. I didn't make the usual offers, no back rub, no sharing music, no leaning toward her during our show to see if maybe she wanted to close the space between us. I just lay on my side of the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to her shift under the covers like she was waiting for me to break character. But I didn't. The next morning, she left before I was even out of the shower. No note. No text. Just a cold cup of coffee sitting next to the French press, steamless and untouched. A quiet metaphor. I took my time getting ready that day. Stood in front of the mirror a little longer. I noticed how tired I looked, not just physically, but in my posture, in the way my shoulders sagged like they'd been trained to carry disappointment. The kind that doesn't scream but lingers, seeps into everything like humidity you can't escape. For years, I thought if I just gave enough, she'd soften. If I could be stable, consistent, she'd meet me halfway. But all I'd done was prove I could tolerate more and more while receiving less and less. And now, apparently, obedience was the new price for affection. If obedience was the cost, I'd rather be broke. That evening, I didn't text her to ask what she wanted for dinner. And when she finally walked through the door 2 hours past the time she said she'd be home, I just nodded in acknowledgement and returned to the book I'd started. She hovered near the hallway like she was waiting for the usual routine, me asking how her day went, offering to warm up her food, trying to reconnect even when she made no effort to meet me there. But this time, I didn't fill the silence. I let it stretch and settle between us like fog no one cared enough to clear. After a few minutes, she spoke. "So that's it? You're just, what? Ignoring me now?" I looked up slowly. "You told me where the line was. I heard you. I'm respecting it." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she turned and walked into the kitchen, fumbling with pots and a pan she probably didn't even intend to use. I heard her slam a cabinet door, not because it needed to be closed, but because she needed the noise. I'd never seen her so rattled by calm. I started watching her more closely after that, not in the way a husband watches a wife he's still chasing, but like a scientist studies a pattern. I watched the way she glanced at her phone whenever I didn't engage, how her eyes flicked toward me during dinner like she was trying to decode my lack of frustration. She wasn't used to quiet strength. She was used to reactions, hurt feelings, arguments. But this new version of me didn't give her drama. It gave her exactly what she claimed she wanted: space, control, no emotional claims. And with every day that passed, I saw her wrestle with it more. She started to ask vague questions. "Are you okay? Is something going on with you?" Phrased just subtly enough to sound like concern but loaded with her own discomfort. I answered honestly, but simply, "I'm good." "You sure?" "Absolutely." I didn't lie. I was good. In fact, I was better than I'd been in a long time, because I was no longer waiting for her to validate my place in her world. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, she walked into the bathroom, leaned against the doorframe, and said, "You're acting weird." I rinsed and looked at her through the mirror. "No, I'm just done begging for things that shouldn't require begging." She stared at me, and for a second, I thought she might cry. But she didn't. She just nodded slowly and walked out. That was the moment I realized something vital. She thought I needed her more than I actually did. She thought withholding herself would teach me a lesson. What she didn't understand was that I'd been learning for years. She was just now seeing the final result, and I hadn't even started the next lesson yet. It wasn't long before she started to notice the silence was no longer a void. It was structure, a deliberate framework I was building. I wasn't sulking. I was evolving, brick by quiet brick. She expected a man who needed her affection to function. Instead, she got a man who had simply adjusted to her absence. What came next wasn't sudden. It was slow, like frost creeping into the edges of glass. It started with the small things she used to ignore. She began commenting on the dinners I cooked for myself. Not for her, not even as a gesture of shared space, but for my own well-being. "That smells good," she said one evening, lingering by the kitchen island while I plated grilled salmon with lemon butter. "Did you make extra?" "I made one serving," I replied without turning. "Didn't think you'd be hungry." I saw her expression shift from mild annoyance to something less defined. Not guilt, but recognition. She was realizing her absence had ceased to register as punishment. The next weekend, I didn't ask if she wanted to watch a movie. I went to the gym Saturday morning, ran errands, spent the afternoon reading on the porch. I cooked again that night, the kind of elaborate dish I used to make only on anniversaries: slow-braised lamb, rosemary potatoes, a spinach salad with roasted beets and balsamic glaze. I plated it like a chef and ate it alone at the table, one candle flickering in the center, my phone playing Miles Davis softly through a speaker. She walked by the dining room on her way to the bedroom, paused when she saw the setup, and frowned. "You're eating by yourself?" "I'm not lonely," I said. "I'm just not including someone who said she didn't want to be part of this." I didn't raise my voice, didn't look away. I let her sit with that. The following week, the shift continued. She started texting me from work, brief check-ins. "How's your day?" Or "Need anything from the store?" I responded politely, but didn't initiate. She brought home wine one night, set it on the counter. I thanked her, but didn't open it. She waited for me to offer. I didn't. I was done performing gratitude for scraps of consideration. Then came the first real slip in her mask. It was a Friday night, and she was on the phone with someone. I assume a friend, speaking in hushed tones that still carried enough weight through the paper-thin walls. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was brushing my teeth again. But the words cut through the hum of the electric brush like a siren. "He just doesn't care. It's like I don't even exist anymore." Her voice cracked. Not enough for a sob. Just enough to let me know something inside her was unraveling. I didn't react. I let the moment pass. Let her think the silence upstairs meant nothing. That weekend, we were invited to a mutual friend's birthday dinner. One of those social obligations couples usually navigate as a team, sharing glances across the table, making small talk, performing connection even if it's cracked beneath the surface. She dressed well, really well. Hairstyled, makeup sharp, heels she hadn't worn in a year. The kind of look she used to reserve for nights we planned together. I noticed. Of course I did. But I didn't comment. Didn't even pause as I grabbed my jacket and keys. During dinner, she clung to me. Not physically, but socially. Leaning into my stories, laughing louder than necessary at my jokes, finishing my sentences like we were still that couple who shared unspoken rhythms. But I wasn't playing the same part anymore. I gave just enough to keep the room comfortable, but not enough to feed her narrative. And she noticed. It all unraveled during dessert. The host, a friend of ours from college, raised a toast, making everyone share something they admired about their partner. A silly tradition. But when it got to her, she hesitated. Her wine glass trembled just slightly. "I admire," she began, then stopped. She looked at me. I didn't blink. "I admire how steady he is." Someone clapped politely. A few smiles. But her eyes searched mine for something more: recognition, warmth, even a flicker of shared history. She found nothing. After dinner, while we walked to the car, she spoke first. "Do you hate me?" she asked, voice low, arms folded not from cold but defense. I shook my head. "No, I just don't chase storms anymore." She didn't reply, just stood there in the parking lot as if waiting for lightning to strike. But it didn't. There was no outburst, no dramatic ending. Just a calm man getting into his car, leaving space for her to figure out if the quiet she'd created was still worth living in. Back home, I went straight to bed. She lingered in the living room, scrolling through her phone like it might offer the validation I no longer did. Later that night, I heard her moving around the bedroom. She changed into one of those silk slips she only wore when she wanted something not for sleep, not for comfort. I didn't say a word. Didn't even glance. When I turned off my bedside lamp, I could feel her eyes watching me in the dark. But I'd already turned the page, and she was still reading from a script I'd outgrown. By the time the third week rolled around, the tension in the house had taken on a different flavor. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of quiet that draws blood in silence, a kind of emotional starvation where the one who set the terms starts craving the very thing they banished. She stopped saying the word obedience, stopped using phrases like boundaries or my autonomy. Those had been weapons once, shields behind which she launched her declarations. But now they sounded hollow even in her own mouth. Because what do you call control when the person you're trying to dominate simply steps aside? She started to perform again. I could see it in how she lingered in doorways, how she dressed differently when we weren't going anywhere. Her makeup appeared even on Saturdays. She'd hum songs while cooking just loud enough to reach me in the other room. She asked questions she used to scoff at. What would you like for dinner? I gave honest answers. Calm, non-committal, whatever you feel like making. And she would hesitate, like she couldn't remember what it felt like to do something without needing a reaction. The shift became more visible when her sister came to visit. Mara was sharp, not cruel, but observant in that way that makes you feel like she already knows the second half of every sentence you're about to say. She dropped by one Sunday afternoon, unannounced, claiming she was in the neighborhood. My wife looked panicked at the door like she hadn't prepared a front to present. I almost laughed at that. Mara and I always had an uneasy truce. She respected me but never liked me. Probably because she knew I didn't play games the way their family did, subtle manipulations, small power plays masked as favors. She grew up fluent in emotional currency. I was always too direct for that. We sat in the living room, the three of us. I noticed the way Mara kept glancing between us, noticing the spacing on the couch, how my wife kept fidgeting while I just sat still, coffee in hand. Finally, she tilted her head and said, "You two okay?" My wife opened her mouth to respond, but I spoke first. "We're excellent," I said. Not sarcastic. Just true in its own way. Mara didn't buy it. "You're different," she said to me. I stopped needing what wasn't mine to have. A pause. Then, a quiet nod from Mara, like she understood more than she wanted to admit. Later, as she walked me to the door when Mara left, my wife whispered, "You embarrassed me." I raised an eyebrow. By answering a question truthfully? "You sounded like we're over." I looked at her for a long moment. "You said no obedience, no intimacy. I gave you exactly what you asked for." She didn't respond. Just stood there, breathing hard, jaw clenched like she wanted to scream but had forgotten how. The next week, Mara texted me. Just a simple line. "You're not wrong. But be careful, she's unraveling." I read it twice. Then again. Unraveling. I saw it too, in the way she started staying up late, aimlessly scrolling her phone. In how she hovered near me in the morning like a ghost unsure where it belonged. Her tone softened, her voice lost its edge. She started asking to join me in things, watching shows I liked, helping in the kitchen, sitting beside me with a book she barely touched. I didn't place a hand on her thigh. And that's what broke her. It happened one night after dinner. I was loading the dishwasher when she came up behind me and placed her hand lightly on my back. The touch barely registered, but in the past, it would have been all I needed to lean into her, close the distance, spark warmth. This time, I kept placing dishes. "You're really not going to touch me," she whispered. "You said it," I replied. "You declared it. I'm just honoring your words." "I didn't mean it like this," she snapped. "Then how did you mean it?" I asked, voice level. Because it sounded pretty final. She looked down. I was trying to make a point, and now I'm making mine. Her eyes filled, not with tears yet, but confusion. Fear. The early tremors of someone realizing the game they engineered was now collapsing on top of them. That night, she crawled into bed early, back turned, shoulders tight. I watched her from my side of the bed, the same bed she once called ours, and thought about how different it felt now. Not colder, just quieter. I fell asleep before she did. I could tell by the way her breathing never settled. The next morning, she wasn't in the kitchen. Her coffee sat cold on the counter, untouched. I left it there, just like she used to leave mine. Let her learn what obedience really costs. Because this was no longer about reclaiming what was lost. This was about ensuring she remembered the exact moment she pushed it away and how calmly I let it go. I don't think she expected it to last this long. Her distance. She thought it would bend me, break me into someone desperate to prove his worth. That's how it had worked before, cycles of withdrawal and reward, the quiet punishment of withheld affection followed by the occasional touch, a kiss tossed like a bone to a dog that waited too long to be fed. It started showing up in subtle cracks. She began volunteering information about her day, her coworkers, her stress. She'd trail after me into rooms she never used to care about, my garage, my office. She lingered near me like the heat she once denied was now something she desperately missed. Then came the evening that really tore the veil. A charity gala we were both invited to, one of those events where everyone dresses up, smiles for pictures, and pretends their marriages aren't crumbling behind the formal wear. She assumed I wouldn't, but I did, and I dressed well, better than I had in a long time. When I came down the stairs, she was already in the hallway, fixing her earrings in the mirror. She turned when she heard me and froze, just for a second, but long enough. Her eyes swept over the suit, the clean shave, the quiet confidence she'd forgotten I possessed. "You're coming?" she asked, carefully casual. I said I would, I replied, slipping my watch on. She looked away then, like the phrase stung. At the event, it took maybe 30 minutes before people started commenting. The women in her circle, once allies in silent critique, kept turning to me, smiling, laughing at my comments. One even touched my arm when I handed her a drink. I wasn't flirting. I was just present, engaged in a way I hadn't been in years. My wife noticed, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of something she couldn't hide. She tried to counter it, subtly placing a hand on my shoulder during a photo, whispering compliments she'd withheld for years. "You look incredible tonight," she murmured, lips close to my ear. "Thanks," I said simply. No return compliment. Later, one of the younger women from her office approached. I'd met her once, briefly. She was kind. She leaned in during conversation, clearly intrigued. "You're not what I expected," she said with a warm smile. "She makes it sound like you're distant." I smiled. People show you what they want you to believe. Across the room, I saw my wife watching us, jaw tight, wine glass gripped too firmly. And in that moment, I understood something critical. She hadn't just lost control of the narrative. She'd lost the ability to define me at all. That night, after we got home, she didn't speak. Not at first. She sat on the edge of the bed, still in her gown, staring at the floor like she was sifting through memories for evidence that she still mattered in the way she used to. Then, in a whisper so soft it almost didn't reach me, she said, "Do you even want me anymore?" I looked at her, this woman I had once centered my world around. The one who set the rules, who decided when I was allowed to feel close, to be acknowledged, to be touched. And now, sitting there in that expensive dress, her face stripped of every armor except regret, I saw someone who had never imagined she'd have to ask for the very thing she used to take for granted. I walked to the closet, hung my jacket, untied my shoes, every movement deliberate. "I don't chase what runs from me," I said quietly. Her eyes filled instantly, but something older. Like she'd forgotten the language of apology and was now trying to relearn it without a dictionary. "You don't know what it's been like," she said, voice breaking. I didn't think it would get this far." "It didn't get this far," I corrected. "You pushed it here." "I didn't mean it like that when I said what I said. But you meant it enough to repeat it. To let it sit between us for months." She stood then, reaching for me, but I stepped back. And in that small motion, everything we used to be collapsed. Not in violence, but in the quiet, crushing realization that she had taught me how to exist without her, and I had learned the lesson better than she intended. That night, I slept alone by choice. She lay beside me, turned the same direction, inches away. She didn't speak the next morning, because the weight of what had settled between us no longer needed words to make its presence known. Silence had become our common tongue, but now it was no longer mine to break. I had spoken my truth. In the meals I no longer made for two. In the way I no longer asked about her day. In the warmth I had stopped offering simply because it was once expected of me. She had drawn the line with her conditions, and I had stayed behind it. I left early for work that day, earlier than usual. She lingered in the doorway of the bedroom, her robe loose. She opened her mouth once, twice, and closed it again. I gave her a nod, not cruel. Just the kind of gesture you give a stranger holding an elevator door. That night, when I came home, the house was cleaner than I'd seen it in months. Candles flickered. The table was set. She had cooked real food, not takeout. She stood in the kitchen with an apron on, the same one I'd gifted her years ago, back when these little gestures were just part of us. "It's your favorite," she said, almost in a whisper. "Braised short ribs." I looked at the table, then at her. She was waiting for something, not forgiveness. To be seen again. I sat, thanked her, told her it was delicious. And she lit up, just a little. But the dinner wasn't a turning point. not in the way she hoped. Because I didn't lean across the table to touch her hand. I didn't invite her back into the space she had so proudly exited. I gave her gratitude. I gave her peace. But I didn't give her a return to the past. Because that version of me, the one who reached first, loved first, no longer lived here. Over the next week, she tried more earnestly. She woke before me to make coffee. She folded my laundry without being asked. But I didn't need anything from her anymore. And that terrified her. One night, I came home late after helping a friend move. She was curled up on the couch, eyes puffy, remote in hand. Not watching anything. Just waiting. When I walked in, she sat up, rubbed her eyes, and said the words she thought would change everything. "I miss you." I nodded. "I understand." "That's it?" she asked. "That's all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? That you miss me too?" she whispered, voice breaking. I stood for a moment, watching her crumble. Not with malice, but with the same sadness a person might feel watching someone realize too late that a locked door has no key. "I missed who we used to be," I said. "But I don't miss begging to be seen." Tears fell freely now, quiet and slow. She covered her mouth with one hand like she was trying to hold the sorrow inside, but it was already spilling out, staining the cushions we once curled into together. She tried again. "I was wrong. About everything. I thought," her voice cracked. "I thought pulling away would make you try harder." I sat beside her but didn't touch her. "You thought I was afraid to lose you," I said gently. "But you never realized I was just trying to hold on to something that already let go of me." She sobbed then, fully. The kind of cry that comes from the gut. The kind people can't fake. And I let her cry. Because I had cried once too. In the early mornings when she rolled away from me in bed. In the long nights when she treated touch like a transaction. She wasn't ready for my indifference. She had armored herself against my rage, but she had no defense against my peace. Weeks passed. I remained kind. Helpful. But distant. She tried to earn back what she'd spent years devaluing, but it wasn't hers to reclaim anymore. She began asking the hard questions. Can we fix this? Is it too late? I told her I needed time. And the truth was, I did. Not to decide if she deserved another chance, but to decide if I wanted to give her one. Eventually, I sat her down. Told her that I no longer operated on terms set by fear or emotional currency. That if we were to start again, it would be as equals, without obedience, without manipulation, with respect, or not at all. She agreed. But agreeing is easy. The real test would come with time. So we started from nothing. No grand gestures. No declarations. Just boundaries. And on most days, I still kept her at arm's length not to punish her, but to protect what I had rebuilt inside myself. She had begged to be seen. Now she learned what it meant to earn that right. And as for me, I wasn't anyone's doormat. I was simply a man who learned what it meant to choose himself, quietly, fully, and without apology.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.